Hi, this is Denise from Denise in Wonderland, a magical journey of faith through Christ. Today, we will sink deeper into God's Word and His truth. We have to chase the presence of God, and we can do so through His Word. Let's get started. Genesis chapter 31. He heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's. From that which was our father's has he gotten all his wealth. Jacob saw the expression on Laban's face, and behold, it was not toward him as before. Yahweh said to Jacob, Return to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field to his flock, and said to them, I see the expression on your father's face, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all of my strength. Your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but God didn't allow him to hurt me. If he said this, the speckled will be your wages, then all the flock bore speckled. If he said this, the streaked will be your wages, then all the flock bore streaked. Thus God has taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. During mating season, I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the male goats which leaped on the flock were streaked, speckled, and grizzled. The angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob, and I said, Here I am. He said, Now lift up your eyes, and behold, all the male goats which leap on the flock are streaked, speckled, and grizzled, for I have seen all that Laban does to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar, where you vowed a vow to me. Now arise, get out from this land, and return to the land of your birth. Rachel and Leah answered him, Is there yet any portion of or inheritance for us in our father's house? Aren't we accounted by him as foreigners? For he has sold us and has also quite devoured our money. For all the riches which God has taken away from our father, that is ours and our children's. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do. Then Jacob rose up and set his sons and his wives on the camels, and he took away all his livestock and all his possessions which he had gathered, including the livestock which he had gained in Padan Aram, to go to Isaac his father to the land of Canaan. Now Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole the teraphim that were her father's. Jacob deceived Laban the Syrian in that he didn't tell him that he was running away. So he fled with all that he had. He rose up, passed over the river, and set his face toward the mountain of Gilead. Laban was told on the third day that Jacob had fled. He took his relatives with him and pursued him 7 days' journey. He overtook him in the mountain of Gilead. God came to Laban the Syrian in a dream of the night and said to him, Be careful that you don't speak to Jacob, either good or bad. Laban caught up with Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mountain, and Laban with his relatives encamped in the mountain of Gilead. Laban said to Jacob, What have you done, that you have deceived me and carried away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and deceive me, and didn't tell me that I might have sent you away with mirth and with songs, with tambourine and with harp, and didn't allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters? Now have you done foolishly. It is in the power of my hand to hurt you, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, Be careful that you don't speak to Jacob, either good or bad. Now you want to be gone because you greatly longed for your father's house, but why have you stolen my gods? Jacob answered Laban, Because I was afraid, for I said, Lest you should take your daughters from me by force. Anyone you find your gods with shall not live. Before our relatives, discern what is yours with me, and take it. For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. Laban went into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, and into the tent of the 2 female servants, but he didn't find them. He went out of Leah's tent and entered into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the teraphim, put them in the camel's saddle, and sat on them. Laban felt around all the tent, but didn't find them. She said to her father, Don't let my lord be angry that I can't rise up before you, for I'm having my period. He searched, but didn't find the teraphim. Jacob was angry and argued with Laban. Jacob answered Laban, What is my trespass? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? Now that you have felt around in all my stuff, what have you found of all your household stuff? Set it here before my relatives and your relatives, that they may judge between us two. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not cast their young, and I haven't eaten the rams of your flocks. That which was torn of animals I didn't bring to you. I bore its loss. Of my hand you required it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. This was my situation. In the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. Unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely now you would have sent me away empty. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked you last night. Laban answered Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine. And what can I do today to these my daughters, or to their children whom they have borne? Now come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be for a witness between me and you. Jacob took a stone and set it up for a pillar. Jacob said to his relatives, gather stones. They took stones and made a heap. They ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jegar Sahadutha, but Jacob called it Gilead. Laban said, this heap is witness between me and you today. Therefore it was named Gilead and Mizpah. For he said, Yahweh, watch between me and you when we are absent one from another. If you afflict my daughters, or if you take wives beside my daughters, no man is with us. Behold, God is witness between me and you. Laban said to Jacob, see this heap, see this pillar, which I have set between me and you. May this heap be a witness, and the pillar be a witness, that I will not pass over this heap to you, and that you will not pass over this heap and this pillar to me for harm. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. Then Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Jacob offered a sacrifice in the mountain and called his relatives to eat bread. They ate bread and stayed all night in the mountain. Early in the morning, Laban rose up and kissed his sons and his daughters and blessed them. Laban departed and returned to his place. All right, so we just finished up the story of Jacob serving his father-in-law Laban. And so if we go back, we're going to start back up in verse 1. This will be a really kind of short one, but this gives us a nice conclusion to everything that Jacob has been through. And we actually get to see him finally speak up for himself here. But what ends up happening is, just like Jacob's father Isaac, when every time he would try to build something, the people would get all upset and get jealous. In the same way, the sons of Laban have become jealous and they're very upset, because what has happened is Laban tried to deceive Jacob. Remember, he said, okay, you can only have, because Jacob volunteered this, he said, you can only have the white goats, and the goats are normally black, and you can have the spotted ones. And then he said also you can only have the black sheep, which there weren't going to be really any of those, as well as the spotted ones. And so what Laban does is he basically takes all the ones that meet those qualifications, so those don't belong to Isaac, because he takes them, and so Isaac is left with these pure sheep and pure goats. And frankly, Laban's intent was that Jacob would never really get any sheep or goats that met those qualifications, because all of the goats would have been black and all the sheep would have been purely white. So it would have been super rare. But what ends up happening is God provides. And despite the efforts of the enemy, God actually intervenes and gives him a strategy. God actually impresses upon Jacob, and we will see this in this dream that he's going to have, that he's going to reflect on, that God would guarantee the success, that he would get exactly what he needed. And so what ended up happening is, all of a sudden, all the sheep, all the goats began to reproduce based off of these rods that Jacob put in front of them. They started to reproduce in the way, so that way they were spotted and speckled sheep and goats, and they were the colors they weren't supposed to be. So they were all the ones that Jacob needed. But what that meant is, since that kept happening, Laban was so what was considered uncommon became common, because that was going to be what Jacob would own. But what it flipped though for Laban. So in Laban's attempt to deceive Jacob, what ends up happening is Laban is left with a diminishing flock, because most of the flock now is turning spotted or these different colors. And so now we've got the kids that are getting upset. Now, I want you to really pay attention to this. Remember, the reason why Laban never wanted Jacob to leave, is because he does see that God is blessing Jacob. And so he loves that he gets to take advantage of Jacob. And as long as Jacob is present, he gets to benefit from these blessings. So Laban is using him. He understands, and it's interesting too, because obviously Laban has his own little gods, but obviously they're not blessing him. But even though he does not necessarily follow the God of Jacob, he is more than happy to sit back and claim the benefits of this. And we get a little glimpse that he's very selfish here. But Jacob gets to a point where he actually hears from God, and God's like, basically, it's time. It's time for you to move on. See, there are times where things may be unfair and God still wants you to stay, because I believe that a lot of times he's building our character and he wants us to learn something. And I think this whole thing is just showing Jacob the pain of working underneath someone who is constantly deceiving. And I think this serves as a warning and a caution to Jacob and to his future children. Like, this is what it's like for someone who is on the receiving end of deception. It's not fun, and it's devastating to the family. And so this is not behavior that should be accepted from someone who's supposed to be the father of many nations. So that's part of the reason why I think he went through this. But then we see Jacob, and this is actually a good thing for Jacob. He, instead of just leaving, he actually speaks with his wives, Rachel and Leah, to talk to them, to say, look, I know I can tell that your dad's really not happy with me, because see, the dad is no longer benefiting from Jacob being there now. And he's basically becoming bitter because Jacob is just getting more powerful. But really, Laban asked for this by trying to deceive him in this way. And so, but Jacob talks to Rachel and Leah about this. He's like, look, this is the way your dad's not liking me, and I'm not liking the look he has. He's like, but hey, my God's with me. So what can I do? He's like, I've served your dad with all that I have, but your dad has deceived me. He's changed my wages 10 times, but God did never allow him to actually hurt me. And then he's like, well, now as a result of the father's deception, God himself is the one who's taken away the father's livestock. Because if you think about it, if God is the one who's forcing these sheep and these goats to be born in these different colors, these rare colors, and then having these rare patterns of fur, that means that God is choosing not to really give Laban any offspring from these flocks. So that means this is also God's judgment against Laban. He's not going to allow him to benefit anymore. And this is a good thing for us to see, because even though we may wonder, God, why don't you do anything about this person, that person, or this situation? But a lot of times there is, just as there are designated times for blessing, there are designated times for when God will sometimes rise up and justify you. And this is what is happening in this case, because now Laban is not benefiting at all from Jacob's presence. And so Jacob then also relates to his wife, saying, hey, in addition to this dream where God basically showed me that anytime these animals mated, they were going to produce exactly what I needed. So I would possess 100% of basically all these animals. And then he said, in addition, he said, God has also told me that I got to get out of here, that we need to return to my father's home. And so Rachel and Leah, they indicate that there's just no love lost, because they said, is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? They're speaking rhetorically. They know the answer. They know the answer is no. Dad has saved nothing for them. And they said, didn't our dad sell us like strangers? Because he sold us basically. He's devoured our money. See, what was supposed to happen is the father was supposed to reserve some money for or something, some type of goods for his daughters. Because remember, Rachel just had a child. And so she could have easily been kicked out at any time or demoted. I mentioned that before, because she failed to have a biological child. And so the father, it was his responsibility to make sure he had some kind of provisions for her. So if that did happen, he had something for her, some kind of inheritance. So the fact that the dad has zilch, just like he has gotten fat and wealthy off of Jacob for 20 years, yet he has nothing for the daughters. So that means that I would say he is constantly consuming. He is a consumer. He's not a provider. And this is not good. So the sisters, they're a little bitter about this. And so that's why they're like, listen, husband, just do whatever God has said to you. Like, whatever you do. Like, he's not our dad anymore because he's treated us like foreigners. So we're going to treat him. They're basically going to treat him that way. So then Jacob decides they're going to leave. Unfortunately, Rachel steals a teraphim. It's probably some kind of household idol. It's something pagan, but it's probably something that's considered valuable in the household. It could be like a family idols that they're passed down. And so Rachel obviously would know the significance in that family because obviously she grew up in that household, but she takes it. And then when they're gone a few days, Rachel, Leah, and Jacob and company, once they're gone, Laban, finds out, hey, they've gone. He chases them down. And then we have this interaction going back and forth between Jacob and Laban. And it's quite clear that they both have especially Jacob has some pent up anger. And he finally shares some of this because he says, where is it? Let's see. It's in verse 30. Where is it? Well, it isn't 30. Well, 30 is one of them, where Jacob is angry. He said, nope, that's not it. Hold on. This is a long chapter, so it's taking me a while to get to it. Here we go. It's in 38. Jacob says, these 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not cast their young, and I haven't eaten the rams of your flock. If we go down a little bit more, he says, verse 40, this was my situation. In the day, the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. And verse 41, these 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock. And you have changed my wages 10 times. Unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely now you would have sent me away empty. And I like this statement because he's, in essence, telling Laban, look, if God hadn't been with me and blessed me to thrive, he would have sent me away a long time ago. The only reason why you want me there, it has nothing to do because Laban said, oh, I want to say goodbye to my daughters and all of that. And Jacob's not buying it. He's like, He said, the only reason why you're having a hissy fit is because of the things that I did, the blessings that I received, you were getting some of that overflow. And if you think about it, once Laban chases him down, he starts trying to be a little sly, saying, oh, I would have celebrated, but he immediately went to, well, why'd you take the household, idols, the teraphim? And then he goes looking. So we really get to see what is Laban's priority. Laban's priority at this time, because frankly, Jacob can go now because Laban's not benefiting from it. So I believe that Laban is more concerned about these household idols. And that is why he tried to be sly and say, oh, saying he was going to throw him a party. I mean, he basically said, I'm going to throw him a party. And let's face it, when Jacob mentioned it before, he was like, oh, no, just tell me your wages. He wasn't going to let him go. No. He was not going to let him go unless he wasn't producing anymore. Then he was going to let him go. I think, frankly, he chased him down too because something was missing. And then we have, towards the end of this chapter, we have Laban and Jacob as they've, spoken out in the open now. We have them come to an agreement, and they set up this pile of stones, and it's called Gilead and Mizpah. And they vow that they will not do each other harm. And the way it's written, it almost sounds like they're also not going to see each other anymore either. I think they're like, look, we're going to respect each other. We're going to care for each other, but we're going to set this as a reminder that we're not going to come over here and try to harm each other. And it's just kind of bringing some finality to their relationship. It's creating boundaries. And boundaries are good because boundaries force us to stay where we belong, and just sometimes you just need to be separated. And I think that the time that Jacob spent serving Laban is obviously over. God has ended it himself. And it's good right here to settle this so no one can say, and because they use the stones, this is good for the kids to see as well. This is good for the sons of Laban, so they're not saying, oh no, we're going to go to Jacob, we're going to go take his flocks, and we're gonna fight him, and we're gonna bring him back to our dad. So this is good because Laban is saying, listen, we have made an oath. And this was these type of oaths or contracts in the ancient Near East. So this was not going to be easily broken. This also sends a message to Rachel and Leah as well. And even though Jacob is unaware that Rachel stole the teraphim, this is good for her to see as well. Like, we're not going to go mess with each other. We're not going to go grab anything that someone else has. Whatever we possess, when we separate, we possess. And this will help them all just move on. Now, one thing I do like is that when Laban finally left, this was after they actually ate and he stayed the night with them. He did kiss his sons and his daughters, and then he left and returned. But this is an interesting chapter because we see Laban, who just was super happy with Jacob. But the moment that he was not benefiting from Jacob's ability to prosper, he just was not interested in him anymore. And I think him being nasty at him had nothing to do with, he's producing a lot. I think he would have been okay with him if he was still becoming wealthy on the back of Jacob. And that is why things soured. And one of the things, as children of God, those who worship Jesus Christ, there will be times that we are in places where we bless people with our presence. This is not to make you feel high and mighty. No, not at all. Because it has nothing to do with us. It has to do with our Father in heaven who watches over us. And so sometimes we may interact with people who may notice, wow, it's like things always work out well for you. And so you attract people that way, but that's a good thing. The reason why you attract people, because that could be used as a way of testifying and witnessing to people about the character of God. But it can also, unfortunately, there are people who may gravitate towards you, who may take advantage of that. And this is why it's important to listen to God, trust him, because there may be times where God's like, no, he's not going to let you work 20 years for so-and-so, and they do not appreciate the calling you have on your life. But then there may be a time where God, like I said, for Jacob, he wanted him to learn something, and he's made him stay in this situation, made him also trust in God, because you have to remember that this all started because of deception on the part on the part of Jacob, when he deceived his father Isaac, and then he got scared, and then so he ended up moving. So this all began that way. But we're seeing here that a man who initially felt like he needed to deceive his blind dad in order to get a blessing from God now no longer thinks that way. After 20 years of working for a actual deceptive man, Jacob has learned that whatever his hands touch, that God, if he wants to bless it, he will bless it. And so this is a different Jacob than the one that left. And this is the Jacob that I believe that God has been moving towards. And this is the Jacob that trusts him. This is the Jacob who listens to God. And this is not a Jacob who I think would easily deceive as quickly as he did before. He's also not someone who could be easily bullied around either, unless God himself tells him, hey, it's okay. So this is a really good part for us to read. But one of the thing I guess that I would want to leave you guys with is be responsive to God. There will be times, as with Jacob, where God gives you a dream. God indicates to you this is not the right situation. And, sometimes what's interesting is we will ask for a way out of something. And when God finally says, okay, it's time, we may stutter and say, oh, but God, well, right now, like now. And God's like, now. And so we have to learn that sometimes we just have to just relax. We have to wait, and we just have to let things go. And we have to understand timing is everything. And there is a time where you're to be blessed. There's a time when you have to leave. There's a time when you have to arrive. And it is in the same way. And we see Jacob now, even though God told him to leave, I love that he still incorporated his wives in the decision. But it's important that you see that Jacob was fairly quick in getting stuff going and leaving. Now, he did keep it secret from Laban, which I understand why. But regardless of all of that, Jacob, he was obedient to what God said. He said, return home. And frankly, Jacob could have decided to stay to just rub it in Laban's face, whether he was mad or not. He could have said, well, these are the wages. You want to change them? Because see, even Jacob acknowledged that even if he changes his wages, whatever he needs, God's going to make sure orchestrates things so that way that's exactly what happens. So be willing to trust God and trust that he understands how you feel. Even though Laban, he had all this pent up inside of him, God understands how you feel. But it is so important that when we walk this earth, that we do it in an honorable way. Because the more honorable we are, the easier it is for us to be when we leave. If we have to leave a situation. Also, the more honorable we are, hopefully the more people are willing, even people that could have been targeting us, they may be willing to relent. And because you have to wonder, when God visited Laban, was Laban willing to listen to God simply because he knew that God was important to Jacob? And so he knew, hey, I can have a conversation with him now, but be accountable, be loving, and just trust God. If he tells you you've got to go, you've got to go. Trust whatever you need, he will provide for. So you work hard, just like Jacob did. You work as hard as you can until there's a time when God releases you from from the mission, so to speak. And that's what happened. Yahweh released Jacob from needing to work for his father anymore. He was being very respectful. And once God releases you and you know you've done well, you can enjoy the separation that much more. See, all the stuff that Jacob has done over the last 20 years, he has to feel good about where he's at in life. But let's go ahead and stop there. I hope God blesses you. I can't wait until we read the next chapter. We've moved on. I know this was a little repetitive today, but I look forward to reading Genesis. I believe it will be 32 with you tomorrow. You again have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye.